It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
So maybe it's the opposite for you, Steven. You're watching the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs, but then you also have to dip into the draft for the NFL. I don't know. There's too many games in the NHL that you got to cover to be able to dip into the NHL or the NFL draft. So how have these playoffs worked out for you so far?
Well, gentlemen, I actually just got my second coffee of the day because I'm going out to the Washington Commanders facility for the draft tonight.
Look at that! Hey, see, I knew it. You're a sports fan like us. It's good.
Oh, yeah. No, the playoffs have been off to a big hitting, really entertaining start with some expected results and like you guys said, some surprises. I think for me, Minnesota giving Vegas a series is something I maybe didn't expect. Carolina dominating against New Jersey with missing Jack Hughes and just being completely banged up is something I think a lot of people in hockey sort of figured was coming, unfortunately, and not being much of a series. I came from speaking to the Montreal Canadiens coach and players and the Washington Capitals coach and players today about that series, which is 2-0 now in favor of the Capitals. But going to Bell Center tomorrow night, which should be just an absurd atmosphere, the first time that arena's had fans for a playoff game since 2017, because when they made it in 21 to the final, the pandemic restrictions limited them to 2,500 fans, even no fans in the first round, 3,500 in the final. So that's going on. The Lightning just took the ice for warm-ups, trying to sort of get back, show that they're in that series against the Florida Panthers. And at this point, like, you try guessing who's going to win the Stanley Cup after the first few games.
Well, this is what's great about the Stanley Cup playoffs, right, is that you have so many good teams that can win it. We're looking at the NBA playoffs, and it doesn't feel the same. And it's really playing out here in the first round. You went through a few of those things. Is there anything that has given you a change of heart or anything you've seen here in the first round that's changed your mind about who's going to win this whole thing?
I do think I think I'm going to be back in South Florida for the Stanley Cup final again for a third consecutive year. There's just something about that team, guys, that just until we see the Florida Panthers lose a playoff series and be on the wrong side of the handshake line, I won't believe they can lose. Wow. And they just looked so good in Game 1 against the Lightning. They were among the Stanley Cup betting favorites going into the playoffs. And we kind of all thought the amount of games that they played sort of as a collective group over the past couple of years would eventually take its toll. And it might still do that. And the Lightning would be able to maybe win that series. And I could change my mind on that in a couple of hours here. But the Panthers being that. And in the West, the Dallas Stars showing that even without arguably two of their 3 or 4 best players, Miro Heiskanen, their number one defenseman, out, Jason Robertson, their leading goal scorer, out, that with Jake Ottinger in goal, with how well that team is coached and defends, can actually give the Colorado Avalanche a series after both those teams loaded up at the trade deadline. That's really something that could be a Western Conference final, really, if it weren't for the playoff format. But that Dallas-Colorado series has now become must-see TV.
You were talking about the hard-hitting nature of the playoffs. I dipped in and watched the majority of that Hurricanes-Devils game. Those are two teams who do not like each other very much. And look, that's not unheard of. These are a lot of teams that see each other throughout the year, but it really comes to a head in the playoffs to a degree that we don't see across the other sports. It's one thing to want to beat the other team to move on to the playoffs, but there is no love lost in almost every one of these series. It's just like it gives cause for fights to break out, for major penalty minutes to be distributed too. I've just loved how insanely physical that the playoffs end up, even compared to a very physical regular season.
It really is, because these teams see each other game after game, and you start getting here's a big hit from somebody else, here's a cheap shot from somebody else, and you have those post-whistle shenanigans that some teams are really good at handling and fires them up, and some teams it distracts them and knocks them off their game. I can't wait for you guys in Utah to experience a playoff series like this with your team at some point, whether it's next year or whenever that is, on sort of their progression. That these playoff series, there's so many twists and turns of momentum from hits. The Capitals in Game 1 against the Canadiens were hitting everything that moves, because over the course of a playoff series, those hits, not just the post-whistle stuff, but the finishing a check might make a player hesitate on the next time he turns around. And there's sort of this mental and physical, psychological and physical toll that adds up over the course of a playoff series, that some of these teams that are big and tough and hit, that they extract a sort of a toll on the other team, on the opponent, over the course of 4, 5, 6, 7 potentially games, that you see sort of that its whole and what it turns out to over the course of a series, and it's really fun to watch.
The Stanley Cup playoffs are fun to watch, and this has been really fascinating. I'm looking at the current state of the bracket right now, and I see 3 teams that had 100 points in the regular season could be out in the first round. I'm looking at the Oilers, the Avalanche, and the Lightning. Now, we talk about how this playoff format creates incredible first-round matchups, but the other side of it is you have these great teams that are out in the first round. Do you like the format, or do you think that they should go back to a 1-8 seeding?
It's amazing how often we talk about this, and I've spoken to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman about this, and the rivalries were great. It's done well for the NHL to sort of build up and make the regular season more compelling by having these playoff series. And the first round of the NHL playoffs is probably the greatest, most entertaining time in sports with 3-4 game nights like this. I do think the players specifically want to go back to the 1-8 format, and the league has said they don't want to do what the NBA does. They don't want to do a sort of expanded playoffs or a play-in. They like the races they get through an 82, maybe soon to be an 84 game schedule. But I do think with the new CBA extension probably coming this summer, and players sort of wanting a little bit more equitable sort of distribution of teams, that you will see it go back to a 1-8. It wouldn't have changed all of the matchups, but it would have been something like Dallas playing against Edmonton. Still, one of those teams goes out in the first round. There's a lot of sort of top-heavy good teams in this league. So I understand why there's sort of a complaint about it. But when it comes to entertainment, and we're trying to all entertain ourselves here, you're getting incredible matchups. I do think it'll go back to 1-8 at some point, but it's really fun to enjoy the ride unless you're on the losing side of those series.
One of the teams that I've been surprised has been on the losing end to the degree that they have been has been the Oilers, who were obviously in the Stanley Cup Finals last year, and they were a game away from making history happen. But that's a team who's got a couple of the best players in the whole dang league. When this thing goes back to the Rogers Center, what happens with this Edmonton Oilers team? Can they get themselves right versus the Kings, who are just absolutely mowing through them right now?
If they can get their goaltending straight, yes. And the Kings this season have been really good at home, not so good on the road. And the Oilers being able to get Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the ice, either together or apart, as much as physically possible, they're going to be able to, in theory, outscore their problems. If they're able to get a lead in Game 3, it's a whole different ballgame. The Kings have been good all year. They're a suffocating defensive team that if they take a lead, it's almost impossible to come back on them, even though the Oilers almost did that the other night and gave up a goal in the last minute. Their biggest question in Edmonton is who's starting in goal between Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, the journeyman backup who might give them a better chance to win. But if those guys can stop a beach ball, then Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid can put their capes on and try to save the Oilers in this series. If
the Oilers lose that series, coming off a Game 7 appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals, how would that impact that franchise? I feel like that would. I know the Kings are a great team, but the expectations are so high for them. It feels like that would kind of rock their core, wouldn't it?
You know what? It could go that way. I would expect it not to. As long as the biggest off-season concern for the Oilers is making sure Connor McDavid signs a long-term contract. Yeah. As long as that does not, and I don't expect it to, as long as losing in the first round would not propel Connor McDavid to say, I don't want to stay here. I don't expect that at all. But as long as he stays and signs a long-term contract, and then they have an off-season to figure out who their goaltender is and sort of plug the holes, I think a reset for that team is actually not the worst thing in the world, because they played such an emotional playoffs last year, getting to Game 7 of the final, almost coming back, like you mentioned, from a 3-0 deficit, and having all that happen. There was due to be some sort of letdown. And if they lose in the first round, make the sort of necessary changes to improve, then I think they have a much better shot at winning the Stanley Cup next year and beyond than they would if they win a series this year and try to go through Vegas or Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg just to get to a final. It's a rocky road this year to the West.
Yeah,
money's interesting across all the big four that we cover, and the NHL is in a different spot from a money standpoint than a lot of these other leagues are. However, they're approaching that $100 million mark when it comes to the salary cap over the next couple of years, probably. They're doing as well as they've ever done. And with those caps going up, then you're going to see these salaries go up. What would a guy like Connor McDavid command on a re-up of a deal now? What numbers are we looking at, and how insane are we going to start to see these contracts start to turn as these TV deals get sweetened and the pot gets sweetened, and then we start to see these salary caps up into the $120 million range in the next 5 years?
Well, if you talk to a lot of the agents I know, it's about time. And
Right.
the NHL's finally getting back to what the salaries were before the 04-05 lockout that wiped out the whole season, put the salary cap into place to begin with, to where, like, just like you can't quantify what LeBron James's value is to a team, how much more money the 10th guy on an NBA bench makes more than Connor McDavid shows you how far the NHL has been behind other leagues and whatever, relief pitchers in baseball and that sort of thing, that it's catching up. The fact that money and business is going well for the NHL means these guys are going to get paid their net worth. And you hope that it doesn't turn into what it was like before 2004, where there was a different class of teams like the Maple Leafs and the Rangers and the Blackhawks spending a lot of money, and teams like the Ottawa Senators and Winnipeg Jets maybe can't afford it. But my guess on Connor McDavid, and this is purely an educated guess, is that he signs for the exact same number. I think it's $104 million, maybe $112 million. The Leon Draisaitl signed for one fewer year. So he'll have a cap hit of something over $15 and change million, be the highest paid player in the league, and then they'd be up at the same time and be able to decide from there to sign new contracts, do whatever they want from there. That would be my guess of making him an over $15 million a year player.
Wow.
The Gabriel Landeskog of the Avs, that was a pretty cool story. I mean, I don't even know how to compare it, but how what's it like to see a player that's been out of action for 3 years take the ice like that? That seemed like a pretty big deal and a pretty significant story in the league.
It's a huge deal because at the time we didn't when he first went out when they win the cup in 2022, we knew he had a knee injury. We knew he was playing through that pain, but we didn't realize was the saga he'd go through to try to get back on the ice. It literally looked like he gave up his right knee to win the Stanley Cup, and so to go through 2 surgeries and then have setbacks, because it was a lot of, okay, maybe he can come back this time last year in time for the playoffs. But there was all these fits and starts of he might be able to do it, and to actually see him go on a rehab stint in the American Hockey League, play in a couple of games, and then dress for warm-ups, and you sort of had this crescendo build to this moment. And for the Dallas Stars to win that game after all of that sort of emotional energy in that crowd, in that stadium, shows you a lot about how good the Stars are. But the Avalanche, from a short-term perspective and long-term now, with Gabriel Landeskog under contract and back playing, he's the leader of that team from wearing the C, kind of the emotional energy that he brings to that team, and a really well-respected teammate. Even guys who played with him who are on the Dallas Stars now have so much respect for him coming back and doing this, because he easily could have said, look, I'll be on long-term injured reserve for the rest of my career. I'll make my money. I'll hang around. I'll sign autographs. I'll live on the legacy of bringing the Stanley Cup back to Denver, and he didn't do that. He worked his butt off to get back on the ice playing and earning that money and trying to deliver another championship.
Last one I have for you. 7 of the 8 series in the first round are there's somebody trailing in that series. The only one that's tied right now is the Knights and the Wild. Of those 7 series, what team trailing right now in the series has the best chance to come back and win it?
I think probably the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm going to throw the Devils out of this too, and I do think the Capitals are going to beat the Canadiens. I wrote this a few hours ago that teams that go down 2-0 in a playoff series when starting on the road in NHL history, only 34 of the 300 teams that have done that have come back and won.
Okay,
that's a little over 11%. So the odds are stacked against all of these teams. And you know what? Honestly, it's probably the Oilers because it's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. The Canadiens look like the team closest to turning things around. They've been in these games, and if the Capitals sort of lapse like they had late in the third period in each of the first 2 games, if they didn't get their bacon saved by Logan Thompson in goal last night, this would be a 1-1 series. But the Oilers, you have to say, have the best chance of coming back because they're the Oilers, because it's Connor McDavid, because it's Leon Draisaitl, and yes, the smart money is still on. Team up 2-0 in a series is more likely to win it, but I bet against Connor McDavid at your own peril.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Stephen Whyno covers the NHL for the AP. He's going to go over with his Commanders hat on over to the facility over there. So who should the Commanders – are the Commanders in need? The playoff the just in the playoff Commanders What are their needs right now? Where are they going to be in the draft tonight?
They did so well in the draft last year, getting Jane Daniels number 2, and even in free agency and trades, getting Laramie Tunsil to play left tackle and Deebo Samuel at receiver, that Adam Peters really has the ability to do whatever he wants at number 29, whether that's trading back if there's a quarterback available and stockpiling picks. They'll get a cornerback probably, but they have the ability, if they want to draft a running back as an upgrade over Brian Robinson. There's really a lot of things they can do with that pick. I think they only have 5 picks total in the draft because they traded so many of them away. But look for them to be active in terms of moving down, moving up in this draft, and trying to have a rookie class that's closer to 7 or 8 players than 5.
Stephen, we appreciate it. Wow, the bonus Commanders breakdown on the draft. You're our only Commanders rep tonight on the program as we talk a lot of draft today, so we appreciate it, man. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for bringing all this energy with the NHL, too, as well. All the Stanley Cup, anything NHL-related, we're just soaking it up here in Salt Lake, so we appreciate it, man.
And enjoy the rest of the playoffs, guys.
There you go. Stephen Whyno, everybody. I love that dude's energy, man.
Yeah.
But he did just have his second coffee of the day, too. Isn't that what he said?
He's got a lot of coffee going through his veins, but that allows him to spit out a lot of information at us.
Love it.
Gave us a lot on the Stanley Cup playoffs. And if you're a Commanders fan out there, you got a little bonus coverage.